Ever feel like you've hit a wall at work?
Mm.
You know, that feeling of been there, done that, no promotions on the horizon. The work has just become totally routine.
Yeah, it can be so frustrating.
It is. And it's a really common experience. And guess what? Researchers have a name for it.
Oh, is that right?
It is.
Huh.
It's called career plateau.
Yeah.
And today, we're going to go on a deep dive into a study that explores this whole phenomenon.
Sounds interesting.
It is interesting, and you might be surprised to learn that it can lead to some pretty negative behaviors in the workplace.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Okay, so this study from the Journal of Occupational and Organizational Psychology really, it really caught my eye because it dives into two different types of career plateaus.
Okay.
So first you have the job content plateau, where you as an individual feel kind of stuck in your current role.
Got it.
But then you have the hierarchical plateau, where a whole team is facing really limited chances for promotion.
So like a collective sense of frustration.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that both these types of plateaus, according to the study, they can actually trigger something called counterproductive work behaviors.
Counterproductive work behaviors. Okay, so that sounds serious.
It is.
I mean, give me an example. What would that look like?
Well, think about things like working slowly, taking a lot of breaks, or even damaging equipment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's not always about, huge sabotage. It's often these really subtle acts that just chip away at productivity and morale.
Okay, so we're talking about more than just grumbling around the water cooler here. This is some serious stuff.
It is.
But how does feeling stuck, I mean, how does that lead to that kind of behavior? It seems like a bit of a leap to me.
Yeah, well, it's all about psychology.
Yeah.
So imagine you're working hard, you're really contributing, but you're not getting the opportunities or the recognition you feel you deserve. You're
Right.
going to start feeling like the company is mistreating you,
Right.
which can lead to resentment. Psychologists call this negative reciprocity.
Negative reciprocity.
Yes. And one way people cope with these negative feelings is by returning the favor through these counterproductive actions.
That's like a silent protest.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But there's another layer to this, and it's called work alienation.
Work alienation.
Yes, it's that feeling of, I guess, psychological detachment from your job. You're just going through the motions.
Yeah, okay. I get that.
Yeah, and guess what? Career plateaus, they can totally fuel this feeling.
So it makes people even more likely to act out in these ways.
Yes, exactly.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, we've got a chain reaction here. Career plateaus,
Yeah.
negative feelings, work alienation, counterproductive work behaviors.
You got it. That's a really great summary. And this highlights how important it is to recognize and address these career plateaus early on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But don't worry. The study doesn't just point out the problem. It also explores some potential solutions, too. That's what we'll be diving into next.
Okay, well, that's good news. I was getting a little worried there for a second.
I know. It can be a bit doom and gloom, but there's some hope on the horizon.
Well, let's hear about those solutions. Let's dive into that next.
Okay, so we've established that career plateaus can really lead to some, well, unproductive, even harmful behaviors in the workplace.
Yeah.
But before we all spiral into a pit of despair here,
Right.
let's talk solutions. The study does offer some help. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. Remember how we talked about that feeling of powerlessness that can kind of come with feeling stuck?
Yeah.
Well, one way to combat that is through something called individual task crafting.
Task crafting.
Right.
So is that like turning your desk into a miniature ship and sailing away to a land of fulfilling work?
Huh. I wish it were that simple. But it's actually about taking initiative to reshape your current tasks.
So they align better with your skills and interests.
Okay, so how would that actually work?
Yeah. So let's say, you're great at data analysis, but your current role involves a lot of kind of repetitive data entry.
Right.
You could maybe look for opportunities to incorporate more analysis into your work, maybe by suggesting a new way to track key metrics or volunteering to create reports that provide deeper insights.
So instead of waiting for someone to give you a more challenging project, you kind of find ways to make your existing work more engaging. I like that. It puts the power back in your hands.
Exactly, yeah. This study really emphasizes that for task crafting to be truly effective, it needs to be supported by the organization.
Yeah, that makes sense, because if you're constantly being told to stick to the script,
Right.
your efforts to kind of reshape your tasks are going to met with resistance.
Exactly. Exactly.
So what would that organizational support look like? Like, are we talking about like flexible work arrangements, managers who are open to new ideas?
Yeah, exactly. Those are great examples. It's about creating a culture of kind of trust and empowerment where employees feel comfortable experimenting and taking ownership of their work.
Right. Okay.
So, think about things like regular professional development opportunities, open communication between managers and employees, and even dedicated time for like exploring different ways to approach tasks.
So it's about baking task crafting into the company's DNA, not just treating it as a like a one-off workshop.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I can see how that would make a big difference in employee morale and productivity. Now, what about those team-level plateaus
Right.
where everyone's feeling stuck? Is there a similar approach for tackling that?
That's where team participation in decision making comes in.
Okay.
This study found that when teams have a real voice in decisions that affect their work and the organization, it can significantly reduce those negative effects of those hierarchical bottlenecks.
So it's about more than just having a suggestion box or a yearly key meeting. It's about really involving teams in the decision-making process.
Yes, exactly. And the research highlights the importance of transparency and follow-through here. So teams need to see that their input is being taken seriously
Right.
and that it actually has a tangible impact.
Right, so it can't just be lip service.
No,
Okay.
exactly. So, imagine a scenario where a team identifies a more efficient way to manage a certain project, and if their suggestions are implemented and they see positive results,
Mhm.
that reinforces their sense of ownership and value.
Right.
On the other hand, if their ideas are consistently ignored,
Yeah.
that can just fuel those feelings of resentment and powerlessness.
So seeing the impact of your contributions can be incredibly motivating, and knowing that your voice actually matters can really counteract that feeling of we're all just cogs in a machine,
Right, exactly.
which is so easy to feel sometimes.
Yeah. It is. And, while this study focused on blue-collar workers in China's manufacturing sector,
Mhm.
these principles are probably applicable across various industries and cultures.
It makes you wonder how widespread this issue is
Mm.
and how much untapped potential is out there, just waiting for the right environment to kind of flourish.
That's a great point, and it highlights the need for organizations to be really proactive in addressing career plateaus and creating that supportive, empowering work environment.
But before we get too carried away with solutions, I think it's important to acknowledge that career plateaus aren't always a bad thing, right?
You're absolutely right. The study focuses on the negatives, but for some individuals, a plateau might be exactly what they're looking for.
Like maybe you've reached a point where you've mastered your craft and you're content with the level of responsibility you have. You don't necessarily need that promotion to feel fulfilled.
Exactly.
Or maybe you're prioritizing other aspects of your life, like family or personal projects, and a stable job with, predictable hours is exactly what you need right now.
Exactly. So career plateaus can offer a chance to achieve better work-life balance or to focus on personal growth, or simply to enjoy the stability and expertise you've achieved in your current role.
It's a good reminder that career success isn't a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
What looks like stagnation to one person might be perfect contentment to another. It really depends on individual values and priorities.
I agree. And while the study didn't really explore these nuances, it's definitely worth considering the conditions under which plateaus might actually lead to those positive outcomes.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. What about the specific counterproductive work behaviors that were measured in the study? Did they give any real-world examples of what those might look like?
Yeah, they did. They used a 19-item scale to assess a range of behaviors.
Okay.
And, it wasn't just about those really dramatic acts of sabotage that we sometimes imagine.
So what kinds of things were on the scale?
So, leaving work early or taking excessively long breaks
Right.
to intentionally working slowly or even damaging equipment. Oh, wow. Okay. And they really distinguished between organizational CWBs, so actions that directly harm the company, and interpersonal CWBs, which, target individuals within the organization.
So give me an example of an interpersonal CWB.
Imagine someone who's constantly spreading rumors or gossiping about colleagues,
Oh, right.
creating that toxic work environment.
Okay, yeah.
That's That's a really classic example of an interpersonal CWB. It undermines trust and collaboration, which can be just as damaging as deliberately mishandling a piece of equipment.
Wow, yeah, that's a good illustration. It's not always about the big theatrical gestures.
Right.
It's often those smaller, subtle actions that can have a huge ripple effect.
Exactly, yeah. And remember, this study was focused on blue-collar workers in China.
Right.
So these specific examples might vary in different cultures and organizational contexts, but that underlying principle remains the same. When employees feel stuck and undervalued,
Yeah.
they're more likely to engage in those behaviors that ultimately harm the organization.
So whether it's leaving early or spreading negativity, those behaviors are often a symptom of a deeper issue. It's like a canary in a coal mine, a sign that something's not right in the work environment.
I like that analogy. It highlights the importance of paying attention to these behaviors and addressing the underlying issue and not just treating the symptoms.
And that brings us right back to the importance of those solutions we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
Fostering that culture of task crafting, encouraging team participation in decision-making, and creating that work environment where employees feel valued and empowered.
Exactly. It's about being proactive,
Hmm.
addressing the root causes, and creating that win-win situation for both employees and organizations.
Okay, we've covered the problem, we've explored the psychology behind it, we've delved into potential solutions. Before we wrap up this deep dive,
Right.
I want to make sure we address any limitations of the study. No research is perfect, right?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Every study has its limitations, and the authors of this one were very transparent about theirs. One key limitation they acknowledged was that they only focused on work alienation as the mediator between career plateaus and counterproductive work behaviors.
Okay, so while work alienation might be a key factor, it's probably not the only one.
Right, exactly.
What
Yeah.
other psychological mechanisms could be involved?
Well, they mentioned that career plateaus could also lead to a decrease in either individual or team identification with the organization.
Okay.
So basically, if you don't feel like you're a valued member of the team or that your contributions actually matter, you're more likely to disengage
Right.
and potentially act out.
Yeah. If you don't feel connected to the company's mission or goals,
Right.
then why would you go the extra mile or even care if your actions negatively impact the organization?
Exactly, exactly. And this feeling of decreased identification could be a completely separate mechanism from work alienation, or it could interact with work alienation in all sorts of complex ways. It's a really fascinating area for future research.
Yeah. And it highlights how much we still don't know about human behavior and how much more research we need to really understand these complex dynamics.
Absolutely. And, the authors also acknowledge that their findings might not generalize to other cultures or organizational environments. They focused on blue-collar workers in China, which is a very specific population.
So we can't assume that what holds true for factory workers in China will automatically apply to like software developers in Silicon Valley or nurses in a large hospital.
Exactly, yeah. More research is needed to explore those nuances and to see how these dynamics might vary across different contexts.
And I think it would be really valuable to see a longitudinal study that actually tracks individuals and teams
Yeah.
over a longer period
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
to see how career plateaus kind of unfold over time.
A longitudinal study would give us a much richer understanding of how those effects might evolve over time.
Right.
And it would also allow researchers to track the effectiveness of different interventions or coping mechanisms.
That would be really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Do the authors of this study talk about specific ways to measure these concepts, like career plateaus, work alienation, task crafting?
They do, yeah. They used several well-established scales that have been validated in previous research. So, for example, to measure individual job content plateaus, they used a 6-item scale developed by Milliman in 1992. So each participant would answer 6 questions related to their perception of their job content plateau, and their responses would be used to calculate a score.
So it's not just based on someone's like gut feeling of I'm stuck.
Right.
There's a structured way to assess it.
Exactly. And they use similar scales to measure hierarchical plateaus and work alienation, both at the individual and team level. And for things like task crafting and team participation in decision making, they use scales developed by other researchers in the field.
So they really did their homework.
Yes, they did. And for anyone who's interested in diving deeper into the specifics of those scales, all the details are available in the study itself, which, as we mentioned earlier, was published in the Journal of Occupational and Organizational Psychology in 2025.
Okay, great. And the authors are?
The authors are Jun Zhao, Ziwang Shen, Wing Lam, Yuping Shi, Ziquang Liu, and Lirong Long.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the problem, the psychology behind it, the potential solutions, even the limitations of the research. What's the one big takeaway you want our listener to remember from this deep dive?
If I had to boil it down to one key message, it would be, even when you feel stuck, you have more agency than you might realize. Career plateaus can be incredibly frustrating, but they don't have to define your career path. You have the power to shape your work experience, even when external factors seem limiting.
I love that. It's so easy to fall into the trap of feeling like a victim of circumstance. But you're right, we have the power to choose how we respond to those challenges.
Exactly.
And often, that proactive approach is the key to finding fulfillment and meaning in our work.
Absolutely. Whether it's through task crafting, advocating for greater team participation in decision-making, or even just reframing your perspective on what constitutes career success, you have more control than you might think. It's about taking ownership, embracing challenges, and constantly seeking those opportunities for growth and development.
That's an incredibly empowering message. And it makes me think about the role of the organization in all of this. We've talked a lot about individual and team agency, but what can companies do to create work environments that minimize career plateaus and foster a more engaged and productive workforce?
That's a great question, and it's one that deserves a deep dive all its own. But at a fundamental level, I think it starts with recognizing that career development is a shared responsibility between employees and organizations.
So it's not just about offering a few training courses or having a vague promotion policy. It's about really creating a culture that values employee growth and development.
Exactly. It's about investing in employees' skills and talents, providing opportunities for advancement and challenging assignments, and creating a clear path for career progression. It's about recognizing and rewarding employees' contributions and creating a work environment where they feel valued and appreciated.
It's about fostering a sense of ownership and empowerment, encouraging open communication and feedback, and supporting employees in their efforts to craft more meaningful and fulfilling work lives.
Absolutely. It's about creating a win-win situation where both employees and the organization thrive.
That's a fantastic point. It's a reminder that everyone benefits when employees feel supported and empowered to reach their full potential.
I agree. And while creating that kind of work environment takes effort and intentionality, the payoff is well worth it.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a final, thought-provoking question to ponder. Knowing what we now know about career plateaus, how would you advise someone to approach their current work situation? Let's say they're feeling that pang of, stuckness. What concrete steps can they take?
Well, I think it really starts with honestly assessing your own situation, Are you feeling stuck because the job content has become too routine? Or is it more about the lack of promotion opportunity?
Right, so step one is self-reflection.
Yeah,
Figuring out if it's a job content plateau or a hierarchical plateau.
exactly.
What comes next?
Action. So if it's a job content plateau, remember that power of task crafting. Look for ways to make your existing work more challenging or engaging. Could you volunteer for a new project? Propose a more efficient way of doing things? Or even find a way to, incorporate a skill you've been wanting to develop.
It's about being proactive,
Yeah,
not waiting for someone to just hand you a more exciting role.
exactly. Now, if it's a hierarchical plateau, things can get a bit trickier.
Yeah, because it's not always easy to just create promotion opportunities out of thin air,
Right.
especially if the company structure is very rigid.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean you're totally powerless.
Okay, so what can you do?
Well, this is where those soft skills really come into play. Communication is key. Have an open and honest conversation with your manager about your career aspirations and just see if there are any alternative paths for growth within the company.
Okay.
Maybe there's a lateral move that would allow you to gain new skills or experience, or maybe there's opportunities to take on leadership roles within, projects or committees.
So it's about thinking outside the box,
Yeah.
not just assuming that a promotion is the only way to get ahead.
Exactly, yeah. And even if your current company can't offer you those opportunities right now, gaining these new skills and experiences can make you a more competitive candidate for other positions down the line. It's all about investing in yourself and your future.
Right. Taking ownership of your career journey,
Yes.
not letting a temporary setback derail your long-term goals.
Exactly. And here's another really important point. Don't let those negative emotions fester. Remember that whole cycle of resentment and counterproductive behaviors that we talked about?
Yeah,
That can be a slippery slope.
I can.
It can really harm your career prospects in the long run.
So even if you're feeling frustrated or stuck,
Mm-hmm.
try to channel that energy into positive action.
Exactly. Exactly. Focus on what you can control, seek out those opportunities for growth, and don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. And, if after all your efforts you still feel like you've hit a dead end with nowhere out,
Yeah.
well, maybe it's time to consider exploring some other options.
It's like that saying, sometimes you have to close a door to open a window.
I like that, yeah. It's about recognizing when it's time to move on and seek out a work environment that better aligns with your values, your goals, your aspirations.
Sometimes the most empowering choice you can make is to just walk away from a situation that's no longer serving you.
Absolutely. And remember, a career plateau doesn't have to be a negative experience. It can be an opportunity for reflection, for growth, even a springboard to something even better.
But the chance to reassess, to figure out what really matters to you,
Exactly.
and then make choices that lead to a more fulfilling, more meaningful work life.
Well said. It's about embracing that journey and recognizing that career paths aren't always linear. There's going to be twists and turns along the way, but with the right mindset, a proactive approach, you can really navigate those challenges and create a career that truly aligns with your passions, your purpose.
That's a fantastic note to end on. It's a reminder that we all have the power to shape our own career destinies. Even when we feel stuck, there are always paths forward. It's about having the courage to explore those paths
Mhm.
and to really create the careers we truly desire.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that inspiring note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. We hope this exploration of career plateaus and counterproductive work behaviors has given you some valuable insights and actionable takeaways. Remember, even when you feel stuck, you have the power to make a change. Embrace the journey, take ownership of your career, and never stop seeking opportunities for growth and fulfillment.
And be sure to join us next time for another deep dive into the world of knowledge.